So, I wasn't a massive fan of Chess and the Admiral Sea, which I know is kind of a sin because everyone talks about this novel as being so much fun, it's brilliant. I know like Bookborn loved this one, but for me, like Princess Bride kind of Cosmere novel, it's not really the reason why I read fantasy or even the Cosmere. I mean, it's kind of nice to see other stories in the universe that are not like Mistborn or sort of epic, but for me, this novel didn't do that much. But that was why I was so excited to actually check out Yumi and the Nightmare Painter. But I kind of went into this novel expecting to absolutely love it, and to be honest, I did really enjoy it. But I also think that the fact that we have Chess of the Emerald Sea and Yumi and the Nightmare Painter kind of novels in the Cosmere does have some implications of how people perceive the Cosmere. So I kind of want to discuss that today, and also just all my thoughts. This is going to be 100% spoiler free. But yeah, if you didn't know, I was invited to Golan's Fest last week. So that's the publisher of Brandon Sanderson in the UK. They had like this big book convention event, and they asked if I could host a book club discussion about a Sanderson novel. And I chose Yumi and the Nightmare Painter. It was so cool to actually meet people in real life and talk about the Cosmere, about Brandon Sanderson, and about their thoughts about the Yumi and Nightmare Painter. So that was a huge honor. And I was also able to meet Joe Abercrombie, and I here have like a sample of his novel coming out next year. And as you can see here, I got it signed. I literally had a beer with Joe Abercrombie. That's like a bucket list goal of mine, and I'm so excited about that. But okay, let's talk about Yumi. Let's first talk about what I loved about this novel, what I didn't love, some of the implication I think that this novel kind of has for how the Cosmere is perceived. Okay, so is this my favorite Cosmere novel of all time? No, but it might be my favorite standalone. Now, I personally think that Brandon Sanderson's series are so much better, like Mistborn, Stormlight Archive, for example, are so much better. I kind of enjoyed Elantris. I know at the moment it's a standalone, but it's going to become a series. But not really any of the standalones are like favorites of mine. I think they're fine. Like, I kind of enjoyed all of them, but none of them have been 5 out of 5 star reads for me. And when it comes to Yumi and Nightmare Painter, I actually expected to potentially give it 5 stars, but ultimately I ended up giving it 4.5 stars, and I'll get to that in just a bit. But what did I love so much about this novel? Firstly, I know this is not the main thing, but it's actually really nice to see Sanderson being able to write romance in a nice and compelling way. Sanderson definitely has a reputation of not being that good at writing like romantic relationships, if you look at especially Mistborn. But I think in the case of here, it was actually handled really well. Secondly, I think the concept was absolutely fascinating. Now, if you haven't read this novel, then I will just keep it spoiler free. But it was a really enjoyable plot that definitely had you second guessing about like, how does all of this work? Like, what's going on with the world building? Where are these characters? How are they related and so on? I really enjoyed the concept. And then I think just the character arcs and the characters were really great. Yumi was a great character that came from this very religious background. And there was definitely like a lot of expectation on her because she's grown up in a system where people have very high expectations and kind of see her as this religious figure. And then Nicaro, the Nightmare Painter, had this job of confronting living nightmares. I think that was so cool with the world building, is that in this world, in the evening, nightmares came out on the street. So they're almost like these spirits that are really horrifying, and the way that you would combat them is by having painters that would then draw a picture of them in a way that wasn't scary, and that would basically make them disappear. But these two characters are so different, and when you read them you kind of understand. I don't really want to spoil anything, but you kind of get understanding of how different they are. Then I think both of our protagonists had some real great complexities to them. For spoiler reasons, I won't get into it as well. Both Nicaro and Yumi had some things in their past or society had put something on them that made them feel more complex and relatable, so I really do appreciate that. And then also we have Hoyt again. Now, can someone tell me what's the deal with Hoyt? Like, Hoyt, he shows up in so many Cosmere novels, but I'm not really sure what the purpose is of him. I mean, for example, we have Kels here from Mistborn, and everyone knows what his role is. And we have Kaladin and Shallan, and we kind of know what these characters are, but Hoyt, he just constantly pops up in the Cosmere, and I know he can jump between worlds, but what is the point of Hoyt? I don't really get it. So what I will say about Yumi is that I had a wonderful time with this novel, but let's talk about some of my criticisms, because I did find the ending of this novel to be a tad bit confusing. And it was interesting because when I was having the book club discussions at this book convention about this book, almost everyone agreed that the Sanderlange in this novel, albeit like the stakes are definitely raised and it has some really interesting implications for the plot and so on, understanding exactly what happened was quite confusing, and it almost feels like this novel could have benefited from being 30 or 40 or maybe 50 pages longer, just so we could fully understand exactly the implications of what happened. But the other thing about the conflict is that it felt a bit random. I mean, at the end, we kind of have this big revelation and it kind of ties up the whole story, but it kind of felt like we were in this 17th century Asian-inspired setting, and then suddenly we definitely weren't. And I do appreciate when authors do explore things in different ways, have interesting things with the world building, but I'm not fully sure if that climax was that interesting. And I kind of had to go to Reddit and reread some stuff in the book and stuff to fully understand what happened, and then it kind of clicked. And now I do think I do understand the ending. But yeah, it just felt like we were on this nice coming of age kind of story that has some really interesting world building, and then suddenly like there was a villain in the story and things ramped up, and yeah, I'm not really sure. And then secondly, I have to mention at the very end, Brandon Sanderson, he uses a trope that thematically, I just feel like it did not fit the story. A mini spoiler just about the theme here, but thematically, a big part of the story is that not everyone has a happy ending, and sometimes in real life, people don't have a happy ending. So that's a big theme in this novel, and Sanderson kind of focuses on that. But then at the end, Sanderson kind of just abandons that theme. I didn't really understand the ending and why he allowed the ending. Even though it was beautiful and it was nice, like thematically and structurally, it didn't really make much sense. But what are the implications for the Cosmere? Because I've mentioned this a couple of times. Now, what I find so interesting with the Cosmere is that we have novels like Mistborn and Stormlight, which are really high in epic fantasy. And I genuinely believe that a lot of people, they pick up the Cosmere because they are excited about Mistborn or Stormlight. But now with Mistborn Era 2 and Treasure of the Emerald Sea and also Yumi and the Nightmare Painter, we suddenly have a lot of works that feel tonally a bit different than those high epic fantasies, if that makes any sense. And I actually think it's quite nice that we have variation in the kind of stories we have in the Cosmere, but I also think that going forward, it is probably quite likely that more and more readers will pick up Cosmere novels and find all-time favorites, like for me, Mistborn and Stormlight Archive, and then they will also pick up other works in the Cosmere that just feel so different and probably also doesn't provide exactly what they were hoping to get in a novel. For example, Treasure of the Emerald Sea, right? You have read the Stormlight Archive and then you pick up Tress, and those two novels, yeah, they're both in Cosmere, but like thematically and like the tone and everything about this plot structure, everything is so different that while you kind of feel it's Sanderson, it might not be the reason why you picked up that novel in the first place. So what do you think about the Cosmere and the state of it, and the fact that Sanderson, he is allowing himself to write these grand epics, and then he also writes Yumi and the Nightmare Painter or Treasure of the Emerald Sea, both stories that have way lower stakes and also tonally and thematically are often quite different from the other novels. Personally, I quite enjoy it, but it feels like going forward it's going to be more and more hard or challenging to say you should pick up the Cosmere, because going forward it's going to be more and more challenging to define what the Cosmere is. So it'll probably become like a situation where you will recommend the Stormlight Archive to fans of epic fantasy, but you probably wouldn't recommend Treasure of the Emerald Sea to the same reader, which again is not necessarily a bad thing, but I just find it interesting how the Cosmere is just growing to this thing that has so many different stories in it. But yeah, that was just a quick review of Yumi and the Nightmare Painter. Yeah, I gave this one 4.5 stars, and it is arguably now my favorite Cosmere novel, and I'm hoping to sometimes this year to read The Sunlight Man, but from the reviews from a lot of people that I trust, I'm quite worried about picking that one up because a lot of people say it's not that great. Thank you so much for watching to the end of this video. Now, if you want to support what I do here, then I do have a Patreon. Now, a reason why I created a Patreon was to find a new way to reinvest to the channel, because basically since I created my Patreon, I spent around 100% of my earnings to hire an editor to do a couple of videos for me a month. Now, since creating my Patreon, an editor has done more than 20 videos for me on my channel, so it makes a huge difference. Now, if you join my Patreon, you will also get some benefits. For example, you'll get a name in my videos like these guys. You'll also be able to join the exclusive Viking book club where every month we read one book together, and you might be the one to put the book forward. This month we're reading this book, and next month we're reading this book. You also get to vote on my next read, get access to exclusive videos like a wrap-up or even book reviews, and so much more. But this is totally voluntary, but all support is much appreciated.